What's that?
Started. Thanks everybody for being here. We had about 30 or so last night at Liberty High School for our first community engagement meeting for this fall around facility master planning. Many of you are familiar, so thank you for staying connected and engaged in this work over the last couple of years. Do have a couple of our board members here. Karen Rogers, front and center, along with Angie Reed. I think those are the two. We had Dan Currents was there last night as well. But great conversations and questions. And so our format for this morning is to turn it over to Kevin Nelson from Hollis & Miller. Many of you know him. But we've been fortunate to work with him and the Hollis & Miller firm over the last several years, whether it's looking at demographic projections or facility assessments as we walk through each and every one of our campuses, or looking at the facility master planning process, which you'll speak to in a little bit, as far as where we are and where we've been, but then also really culminating in recommendations that we want to process with you. We want to process with our entire community, certainly with our Board of Education, as we bring recommendations to them for consideration of a future bond issue. Just to kind of put some additional context, we have the capacity to do up to a no tax levy increase bond issue equal to about $175 million. It's not to say we would do all of that, but that is really kind of our ceiling at this point. Again, emphasize, underline, highlight, underscore, no tax levy increase. We were fortunate in 2018 to pass a near $50 million no tax levy bond issue. From that standpoint, and you see the fruit of that work in terms of the projects at many of our campuses across the district, safety and security improvements, and the like. So we're going to turn it over to Kevin Nelson this morning to walk us through where we are. We'll also talk about our next steps, but then provide opportunity for you all to ask questions of us that come to mind. So be thinking about your questions. One other piece is that we did a Facebook Live last night. And just to ensure that we have better quality, we are recording this morning's presentation that then will be archived so that you can see the slides and so forth. Also want to draw your attention to our webpage. We have a couple of pieces that are out there that we'll speak to later on in the presentation. So you should have a QR code on that sheet in front of you that will then get you to our Let's Talk portal. We've set up a facility master planning portion to that then you can take a look at all of these projects that you'll see this morning. But then we're also, as of this last Friday, we've let out a survey for feedback from our community on each of these projects. So please help me in welcoming Mr. Kevin Nelson from Hollis & Miller.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Happy to see all you guys here today. We're gonna do an update on the process. So quickly, kind of just recap what we've done to date. We started this master plan back in spring of 21. So we've spent some good time working through this. So I want to kind of share what that looks like. And we're gonna review the process. We're gonna talk more specifically about what this fall looks like as far as those activities. And then we're going to spend a big chunk of this morning looking at the potential projects on the list and kind of what are included in those project areas, and then provide some opportunity for you guys to give us some input, because that's really what we're looking for, is hearing from the community on kind of what their priorities and needs are. So just real quick, this is kind of a quick diagram of what the master planning process looks like. It is a 5-step process. Starting in spring of 21 through spring of 22, we were all the way through that green bubble of step 4. But we spend lots of time through that year collecting data, researching what the district has as far as building capacity, what those needs are, interviewing staff and students and community surveys to collect all that understanding of what the district has to work with. And then in that step 3, we create what we call planning criteria, which is basically writing down what are our priorities for any projects going forward. We can then weigh those back to the priorities to make sure we're kind of addressing all the needs that we have in the district. That step 4 is just looking at all options. What are the needs? What are the things we might want to do as far as improvements? And then step 5, where we're at now, is just really trying to culminate all this information into one plan that we can then adopt and move forward with. So just a quick slide to show what we've done to date as far as collecting that information, trying to find opportunity for staff and students in the community to give input, as well as working with the district admin team on what these needs and priorities are. You'll see we did have a parent community survey similar to the one that you can take again now, that we had about 1,500 participants take last year. I think we had about 800 yesterday on this current survey, so if you haven't taken it yet, please hit that QR code on the table and encourage your friends and neighbors to take it as well. And then last year we also had about 300 people participate in the community project review sessions, and then about 3,200 people viewed that Facebook Live piece last time. So we're hoping again to kind of recapture some of those input pieces going forward. So specifically to this fall, since we kind of took a bit of a break over the summer, we have kind of pulled back together. We've been reviewing the options with the board. We've reviewed the potential projects with the district leadership team. And now we're in this community meeting mode where we had one last night and then this one this morning. The other pieces that we've created that are unique for this fall, different than previous, would be that Let's Talk portal. So if you go on the district's webpage, on that facility and master planning site, you can find more information than what I'm going to be able to share this morning on each of the projects. You can ask questions, you can give comments through that portal. And on that same page is also another way, excuse me, to get to that survey on the potential projects. Once we get through all this community input collection phase, then here in November we're going to look at bringing recommended options to the board for their review. And then all of this is setting up for the board to, if they want to, if they choose to, do a bond issue in April of 23. So there is a timeline to be able to get all that stuff on the ballot and get that prepped. So we're setting the time frame to allow that to happen if the board chooses to. So in December, if that's the case, a master plan would be adopted, and then we would start talking about what that bond language would need to look like for an April election. So let's talk about what the potential projects that are being considered are kind of on the list. Now, you're going to see more needs on all these projects than we can afford. So note that there is going to have to be some prioritization and some culling down from what we're going to show today, but that's kind of the point, is to get your input on what you see on the list, what are the priorities from what you see on the list, and some input there to kind of help us cull down the list to what we can afford. So getting started, we're going to talk about the LED lighting upgrades. So this is district-wide. This is looking at replacing all of our lights within our buildings with LED lights. Now, the cool thing about this is not only does it improve the lighting for our staff and our students in those spaces, but it also has a really quick return on investment. So in about 3 to 5 years, we can pay for those improvements with the about $600,000 annual savings in utilities. So beyond that 3 to 5 years, we've got that $600,000 utility savings that we can then spend on other things. We can spend on other capital projects or other things around the district. So this one's important because it pays for itself really quickly, improves the learning environment, and helps us save money for the future. Next one, looking at air quality, heating, cooling upgrades. So a lot of this stuff sits on the capital plan. There's a mountain of needs in the capital plan. And when we can use bond funds to take those larger projects off the capital fund or the capital plan, that allows us to do some other things with the capital budget annually. So this would help us not only improve the ventilation and the air quality for our staff and our students in the buildings, but again helps relieve some funds in that capital budget as well. Roofing and building exterior upgrades. So this one is about 16.3 million in this budget. You'll see we say up to on most of these slides because there are several projects within this category, and some may make the priority list and some may not. But currently there are about 16.3 million being considered. Heritage would be a large chunk that's being considered because it is one of our oldest buildings, has some of the largest needs as far as buttoning up that exterior, what I call exterior envelope of the building. So anything like a roof, windows, masonry that may need repair and replacement would kind of fall within this budget. So again, a big chunk of heritage would be within here. This is helping us improve that energy efficiency. So if we can replace windows and tighten up those buildings, that helps that energy efficiency. But also a big thing about investing in our existing infrastructure in those existing buildings. Restroom renovations, about $3.9 million of restroom renovations being considered in this project category. Again, this helps free up some of those those capital funds with the bond funds. It helps us increase the health and wellness, just the cleanliness of those restrooms. Also improve our accessibility for our students. So kind of a big important piece looking at those restroom renovations. Playground upgrades, a few of these have been started, so this project would help us finish playground upgrades around the district for all of our elementary schools. Again, this is about improving access but also safety, so this is replacing equipment and the fall protection surface around them. So that would allow us to kind of continue that project that's been started and allow us to be able to get all of the elementaries kind of up to the same parity, if you will, of playground equipment and that safety surface below them. Technology upgrades. As you all know, technology changes very quickly and all the time, and so we need to be continually upgrading our systems and our cabling around the buildings. So this would help us do some of that, as new cabling around buildings, help us enhance intercom systems within the buildings, and it also helps us continue to serve the student needs. As we grow in technology use and around the buildings, we have to make sure that infrastructure is there to support what our staff and students are trying to do through technology. Another cool piece of this project is, you'll see that last bullet, 40% of this could be reimbursed by the federal E-rate program. So this is another one where we can capture some dollars from that federal E-rate program to help offset other expenses. Parking lot upgrades. This one is considering upgrades at Liberty High School, Discovery Middle School, and South Valley campuses. Again, just trying to take big projects off that capital list that are hard to do in a summer and be able to get those taken care of to free up capital money for other projects. Flooring upgrades. This one, about $1.1 million, looks at Warren Hills, Liberty Oaks, and Kellybrook in replacing some flooring throughout those buildings. This not only improves our existing infrastructure and our kind of our operational efficiency as trying to keep those things clean and maintained, but also some accessibility and other things. We want to make sure that those flooring surfaces are maintained properly for our staff and our students. And again, on safety and accessibility, there's a few things within this category that would include just replacement of sidewalks that are heaved or cracked that could be a safety issue, specifically looking at some of that at Liberty North High School. We've got some fire alarm panels around the district that are up for upgrade and need to be replaced. And then again, these sort of things are bigger projects that are a big hit to that capital budget. So if we can take care of them out of bond funds, that helps us move on to other projects. Solar panel integration. So this is looking at, again, how can we invest in reducing our utility costs going forward? And so this budget would look at adding solar panels to maybe a few of our buildings, potentially the new support service building that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But this would help reduce our utility costs, which would then offset and free up money for future needs. The other thing about this would be using this as a student demonstration or learning tool. So connecting the infrastructure of the building, the savings through reduced utility costs to help them kind of understand how we're capturing the sun and to reduce our utility costs. So a cool learning opportunity for our students as well. Nurse office renovations. There's a couple nurses' office around the district that haven't had any upgrades in a long time, and they're tight and cramped, and some of the restrooms aren't as accessible as we'd like them to be. So this allowance would allow us to enhance those nurses' offices, increase that accessibility, as well as the health and wellness within those buildings. Security upgrades. We've done lots of security upgrades around the district and even previously in the previous bond, but this would allow us to continue to kind of upgrade that security infrastructure. So you'll see the list on here, minor upgrades to those secure entries. This can include camera systems or additional cameras, door hardware, door systems. You know, if we've got aging doors that aren't latching as well as we want to, or hardware that's wearing out, we need to be able to replace that to keep the building secure. You also see some fencing and some radio systems to help that security team keep our buildings safe. The Franklin Security and Administration project is a little bit separate from that previous one. This is specifically looking at Franklin's secure entry as well as their admin suite. So again, working to not only continue to have a secure entry, but improve the flow of staff and visitors through that building and that administration area. So looking at kind of a renovation of their whole admin office suite there at Franklin. Learning environments, this one is an allowance of about $2 million. We had something very similar at the last bond where we were able to use this money to increase those learning environments through some smaller projects to enhance things. So the EDGE project over at Liberty High School, if you're familiar, used some of those funds to kind of help increase what we were able to do as far as providing that flexible, collaborative, innovative learning environments for students. So this would look at a variety of projects around the district. Lewis and Clark site circulation. There's still some struggles with the parent drop-off and pickup around Lewis and Clark. And so wanting to be good neighbors to our neighborhood there and also make sure that we're getting kids to and from Lewis and Clark safely, we've allowed a budget of about $1 million to look at the traffic flow around Lewis and Clark to kind of help improve that pickup and drop-off areas as well as the bus traffic around the building. Kitchen and cafeteria upgrades. You'll see this one's a budget of about $11 million. There are a few bigger projects within this, as well as equipment replacement upgrades around the district. So some of the bigger projects that are being considered would be full renovation of Heritage's kitchen scramble and cafeteria area, and Liberty High School's kitchen scramble and cafeteria area to be able to get increase the flow and the ability to serve those students within those spaces. There's a lot of meals being served in and out of those kitchens, and they're ready to be upgraded and renovated to be able to be more efficient for students as well as the staff working in those spaces. These are also big projects that would be a big hit to that capital budget, so if we can take them off the capital list with the bond project, that does help us improve that efficiency and free up money going forward. Heritage Middle School. So we talked about Heritage on the exterior and how it needs some help to button up that exterior, but this is focusing more on the interior. And so Heritage has some square footage within it that's underutilized, and so this budget would look at 3 separate areas around the building, older locker commons, some few spaces that aren't being well utilized now, that we could redesign them into flexible collaborative learning environments so that staff and students could utilize those space for breakout spaces, for large group spaces. But again, this would help increase that learning environment there at Heritage and make it more usable for everyone. Liberty High SPED and fax remodel. This is looking at about the 10,000 square foot chunk of Liberty High School for renovation focused on the fax kitchens as well as the special education area. So fax kitchens are tired and ready for renovation, need to be updated, as well as the special education area needs to be designed specifically for those program needs currently. And so this budget would allow us to specifically design for those programs, find some efficiency, and improve those programs going forward. Now we're going to talk a little bit about some building additions. So the first one would be EPIC multipurpose addition. So if you're familiar with the EPIC campus, it's pretty tight. This would look at an addition towards the north of a multipurpose room. Also, if you're familiar with EPIC, they currently have music, art, lunch, PE, all in the same space. And so it's very hard for them to kind of turn over that space from one activity to the next. So trying to find some space for them to spread out would be this multi-purpose addition, about 6,000 square feet, or about $5 million. The other piece to this to consider is, since the building codes have changed since the last time we built in Liberty, this will be required to be a storm shelter. So anytime we add on to a building that has a large enough capacity for over 50 students, we will be creating a storm shelter. So this multi-purpose room will also be a rated storm shelter, so an extra benefit to the staff and students and the community in that area. Liberty Academy, so we're calling this kind of the new shop or outbuilding. This would allow Liberty Academy to have a space to go do that project-based learning, to spread out a little bit, do some really cool, exciting, unique projects that would happen within this new shop building, about 1,800 square foot building there on that campus, as well as creating some outdoor recreational area for them. You'll see it looks kind of like a half-court basketball court there, number 4 on the site plan. Currently they're playing basketball in the parking lot. Maybe not the safest spot to be throwing around a basketball and playing, so want to be able to give them a dedicated space to be able to get outdoors and release that energy. Moving to the South Valley and Discovery campus, we've got 2 projects here back to back to look at, but starting with South Valley, looking at an addition for performance and gym space. So that building is tight on finding space for PE as well as adequate performance space. So this multi-purpose addition would be designed where you could do both. You could have PE, you could have gym, you could also have a performance space within it. So about $6.9 million is the estimated project cost. This would go on the west side of the building. You can see on that aerial view at the bottom of the screen. And same as Epic, this would also be a storm shelter because it's a large enough addition. It would be required to be that ICC 500 storm shelter addition, so a benefit to that population as well. These projects will be large enough that we can also be a community asset as far as parks and rec activities and other partnerships to use those spaces around the community. Discovery, much the same. So if you're familiar with South Valley and Discovery, they're almost mirror images of each other on the same campus. And so we're proposing mirror image additions, so they would both have the parity of this flex gym performance addition on those campuses. So same scope for this project, also a storm shelter, and would be able to provide them space to spread out for those programs where they're tight on the space. All right, this is looking at a new district support service building. So currently there's an existing facilities building on what I call the Southview campus, and this would be looking at adding another building to that campus. And there's a couple reasons for this new building. Would be bringing a bunch of departments together. Again, efficiency of dealing with product and shipping and receiving and all those programs together. So looking at about a 40,000 square foot building that would house nutrition services, purchasing and distribution, and potentially kids zones departments within there. So there's warehousing pieces to this. Another big piece of this would be nutrition service food storage. So think large cooler freezer within this building. That allows the district to buy food in bulk, helps us bridge the gap of supply chain issues, and make sure that we always have the food that we need for our students. Currently, the district is leasing space to be able to do that. That's something that came up during the pandemic to be able to get through some of those issues. So this would free up that money that we're spending on lease space and bring it back onto our property. Again, this would have district dock space, storage space, potentially that solar array may be able to live on the roof of this building. But again, just trying to find some efficiency through those departments and bring them together to work together. With the movement of some of those departments from the 801 Kent building, or the transportation facility, into the new building, we now free up about 11,000 square feet within the existing transportation facility. And this provides us some opportunity to create some student space, some secondary student space, whether that be auto tech, which could be paired up with our transportation department. So some pretty cool on-the-job training, kind of pairing up collaboration between our professionals and our students there between auto tech and the transportation department, as well as some Project Lead the Way type lab space, project space that could happen within that existing facility with these renovations. We may also be able to realize a portion of that to provide our security department a home base going forward. The remodel of the Mid-Continent Library. So the district bought the Mid-Continent Library a couple of years ago, and it's in need of some renovation to be able to create a new technology department home, as well as some additional professional development space within that building. So the district's current technology server is in need of upgrade, so this movement would be coincide with those upgrades, so a good time to kind of have one online here at the District Administration Center and get another one online somewhere else and make that seamless switch. With that move of technology to this building, that would free up second floor of this building to expand admin, office space, and professional development space within District Administration Center. All right, back over here at Liberty High, looking at adding tennis courts to this campus. Currently don't have tennis courts on the Liberty High School campus, so this project would look at removing the current metal building, or the old grounds building as some of us call it, there in the southwest corner, and being able to add 8 tennis courts and kind of clean up the parking lot up around that. So that would eliminate students from having to travel to Bennett Park. They would be able to have tennis on site, as well as increase opportunity for PE classes and other things. And even Epic across the street can then come over and use the tennis courts as well. So again, a good asset to this corner of the district. Liberty Middle School, if you're not familiar, Liberty Middle School does not currently have a track. It's the only middle school in the district that doesn't have direct access to a track facility. And so this project would be looking at adding a 200-meter track to that campus, just right there next to their existing soccer field. Currently, their track activities are in the parking lot. So again, trying to get students off the parking lot and onto an adequate track is the goal for this project there at Liberty Middle School. Liberty High School, this project looks at adding turf to baseball and softball. So again, the idea here is reducing maintenance of those grass fields and increasing usage of those fields. If we turf them, we can use them at all hours of the day by PE, by fine arts, by the baseball, softball programs. So this project would look at that. If we were to do this project, we'd also be looking at upgrading the restrooms concession building within that site. So that would improve that whole kind of complex there going forward. Very similar over at Liberty North, we'd be looking at turf on both baseball and softball fields there that you see in orange. With both these projects at Liberty High School and Liberty North, there is a little bit of fencing and backstop repair and replacement, as well as some dugout work. But the idea here is just multi-use fields that we can use all day long and not continually fight the maintenance of turf, of natural turf, to keep those safe for our students. So again, trying to get the most use of those fields for all types of groups, for PE, for fine arts, for sports and athletics, as well as partnership activities or opportunities with the community on both campuses. Next project, looking at a new district aquatic center. So if you're familiar with aquatics, back when the community center was built, there is a pool there. It wasn't designed for 2 high schools or 2 high school swim teams to be able to support that. So the current swim teams really struggle to find space to practice and to host meets and to really support those teams. So this project would look at about a $47 million new facility. It would be about 51,000 square feet, looking at a 50-meter, 8-lane pool with a dive well. This large pool would have 2 movable bulkheads in it that could adjust the size of different practice areas. So you could have multiple practice areas within the same pool. This building would have spectator stands for about 1,000 to 1,200. So again, we can host meets here within the district for our swim teams. The other piece of this is there's a lot of opportunities to partner around the community with, whether that be swim clubs, whether that be William Jewell. There are opportunities to basically partner with them to help offset some of those operation costs that would come with the pool. You'll see on the bottom of the screen there's a proposed potential location for the Aquatic Center. This would be on the South Valley DMS campus. There in the corner in the kind of blue rectangle, just to kind of see what this building might look like within that campus there on the corner. One reason to consider this would be we can share parking, we can share some of those other facilities, as well as that would get 2 more of our middle level buildings direct access to pool for PE and other activities for the Aquatic Center. And then the final one we're going to talk about today is just land acquisition. So this is a $2 million allowance to buy vacant land to use for future needs. So kind of could be seen as an investment in the future. We don't know exactly what the growth is going to look like in the future. We don't know what program growth is going to look like. We may need a new facility at some point. And to have the land there available, if needed, is a nice asset for the district to have, and kind of an insurance policy for the future. If it were to be determined in the future that that land was not needed, it's an asset that the district could then sell. You'll see several districts around the metro that have become landlocked, kind of wish they had done this, right? Where they're growing and their needs are changing, but they don't have any place to build. So it is kind of that insurance policy for the future of what's kind of unknown going forward. All right, so now we're going to pause a minute. I would like to entertain questions. I'm going to have a couple questions for you that we'll engage after this, but certainly if you all have questions, we'd love to hear from you.
You mentioned in several instances that doing some of these projects would free up capital funds. What is the annual capital budget?
Good question. $2.5 to $3 million is that annual capital budget. So again, if you have $1 million flooring replacement, that's going to wipe out a big chunk of your capital in 1 year, and so it's hard to get caught up on all those projects. So that's why you see some of the bigger projects on the list would help us with that.
And a lot of that is taken on during the course of the summer, right? In terms of our summer maintenance, and several of our team are in the back corner. They do the lion's share of that work. So as we identify what those needs are each year and then shelve that for summer work, we work as far as we can on that list, and guess what? We never get to the bottom of the list. So I think tackling some of those bigger projects, as Kevin has mentioned, gets us that much further down the road, as you know.
I have a question about partnering with Liberty Parks and Rec. Would that bring in any additional revenue? Or is it just we're being good neighbors and they get to just use the facility?
Yeah, I don't know that we would count on revenue from Parks and Rec, but again, it's a community type asset for the community to be able to share those facilities.
Okay, then piggybacking on that beautiful pool idea, our community desperately needs a really nice high functioning community center. Has there been talks with Liberty Parks and Rec in trying to create something that our swim team, that same idea, but it's also a much larger scale where it can be used as a really nice community center as well?
I mean, that's an interesting idea. We'd be open to all ideas. I don't know if that's specifically anything that's been discussed.
It has. There have been ongoing conversations. Nothing concrete to share, but we've had conversations with many of you, parents, certainly in terms of your interest and your engagement in club swimming. You know, Tsunami comes to mind as far as that group. In addition, conversations with William Jewell College on partnership opportunities, and that they have a collegiate swim team, right? As well as the space they have over at William Jewell's campus. Conversations with Clayview. So I think I would say we're really at that early stage of continuing to explore what those partnerships are. We've had more conversations with parents, quite frankly, than we have with some of those partnerships. If you are tracking what's going on in the community with the Montage development in and around Liberty North High School, that is working its way through the city in terms of approval. That is a 20, 30-year plan. The reason I mention that is we've had a recent conversation with the developer, very preliminary, kind of exploring what our options may be there as well. So yes, there are opportunities for partnership. I would say we're really on the early side of that as far as solidifying anything concrete that we could come and share. We know the need is there. But as you saw that price tag, just to put it into context, the last bond issue that we put in front of our voters for consideration was right at around $49 million. The largest bond issue we have taken on when we built Liberty North High School, that was phased in over several iterations. Mr. Anderson and Ms. Sullivan and I have been involved in 2 of those iterations with Liberty North since we arrived. You look at the price tag for the aquatic center, it sits currently at $47 million. So that gives you a little bit more context. Back on your earlier question, in partnership with the city and revenue streams, we do a lot of that through our facility usage agreements. You probably have kids in basketball programs and different activities that use our spaces. Anything that we add in terms of an activities space, whether it's for performing arts, fine arts, or whether it is for athletics, provides that opportunity for added partnership, to your question. And that's inside or outside. So as you think about Kevin's presentation of those projects, be thinking that, yes, those are all opportunities. I will say this, the priority on our end is our student activities first and foremost. And so if you think about a baseball season or a softball season where grass is being maintained and fields are being striped in the spring or in the fall, coaches in particular get a little territorial and say, hey, my field's ready. I don't want anybody during season to ruin my field, which I understand. Moving that to turf changes the conversation and the access. So I hope that answers your question. Over here, Mr. Rosecrans.
Parks and Rec is in the early stages of master plan, and I'm not sure, you'll have to check the city website, but they have been taking public input, and there will be some meetings online and in face regarding your question about the community center, an added community center.
So would that then, do we want to be voting and putting all that money into this swim building when we possibly might be getting a community center that could be doing that and it's not fully funded by our school dollars?
That is the question of the hour. So, and certainly you could approach that different ways. We could probably have justification for both, right? We've got a history of having partnered with the City of Liberty early on when we built that community center in partnership with them. It has certainly been beneficial, served its purpose. So yeah, there are opportunities whichever way you go, and pros and cons as well. So yeah.
Did the school pay for that, or did the city pay for that?
That was in partnership. Do you know, Mr. Anderson? That was jointly.
The middle school and the community center will go kind of at the same time.
Okay.
And then just real quickly, there is an agreement that between the district and the city that allows for shared use of the swim facility, of the fine arts, and of course the city uses all of our park and rec, or all of our gym facilities for park and rec. So
And we had a similar approach when the courts at Bennett Park were constructed, as far as a partnership approach then as well.
Right, that's correct.
Yeah.
And if I said on Parks and Rec,
Yeah.
there is an open house on November 15th at the community center at high school.
All right, Ms. Henderson.
I have one question. Actually, I have 2 questions, but one thing I would just mention about assuming an ease of use with a partnership with the community center for a pool is one of the, and I won't get into it today, but one of the things to ask families about who experience it from the swim team side for like a high school swim team is water temperature is kept at a different rate for water aerobics and swimming lessons than it is for high competitive swimming and high intensity training. Warm water is not safe for kids to like train in and swim in, and it's what people want for water aerobics and teaching little kids how to swim. Little kids don't want to swim in a cold pool. So that's one thing to consider is water temperature can't change, by the hour. Like 1 hour it's for this temperature and 1 hour it's that. Okay, so one of the things I think is interesting is talking about our previous bond issues and what we've been able to afford. For all of our collective referencing, if we were to, we don't need a new elementary school, but if we did, what would that elementary school have cost 2 or 3 years ago versus what it would cost now? I think
more.
that's, I know, but I think sometimes it's easy for us to think, oh, well, last time we built this, it cost,
Right.
and so we.
That's fair. That's a great question. I'll turn that over to Kevin.
I think that is a great point to make. So if you're at all familiar with the construction industry right now, or almost any industry, inflation is through the roof. So a few years ago, before the pandemic, a new elementary school might have been budgeted about $24 million. Currently, I'm budgeting a new one for about 42. So same building, just a few years different. So inflation is real, and it's something that we have to plan for. So all of these budgets you see being presented today are taking into account that these wouldn't be voted on till April, and probably not out to the bidding market till the fall of 23. So there is inflation estimated within those budgets to protect the district, so that if we approve a project in April, we can still make sure that we can deliver it when we actually get design done and out to the bidding market. So great point. It's a different construction market now than it ever has been.
A couple adds to that in terms of our enrollment. Okay, that is something that people always ask. As far as our current enrollment, it sits just under 13,000 students, specifically 12,544 as of October 8th. But that will grow over the course of the year to be closer to 12,800 because our pre-K early childhood kiddos age in over the year. That gets us closer to 13,000. All that said, our current demographer has us pretty plateaued right now, if not losing a few students for various reasons, particularly at our younger grades. So our younger grades at like our kindergarten class sits at right about 750 to 800 across the system, as compared to our largest class, which is our freshman class. The Tucker household contributed to that. We have about 1,000 students at that freshman class. So we watch that. We go back to the drawing board with our demographic projections every 3 to 4 years. We're due to probably do that again in the next year. Factor in developments like Montage that will impact us over the years. I'm looking at Ms. Cook over there because she's going to monitor that for us. But all of that said, you're not seeing the addition of a campus, elementary, middle, or high school, as we continue to watch that pretty closely. You've seen some additions to campuses, but not a brand new facility as far as an elementary, middle, or high school. The land acquisition gets us a little further out there if and when we look south for any type of expansion as South Liberty Parkway opens up and so forth. The other piece that I would say to that is in respect to our bonding capacity. That continues to be a situation where we're able to come back to voters really every 3 to 5 years is that sweet spot in terms of no tax increase bond issues. So we want to continue to be able to do that and sustain that over time. Yes?
Just maybe my ignorance on the bond, how that works. What's the injection of cash that would be perceived or, you know, hoped for to be able to pay for these? Like, I guess I don't know how much are we looking to, I know, like, if you add up all these, and I know we're not going to do them all, but you're looking at 75 maybe to 100 million. So what's the projected bond, if you did pass the bond, like, what's the amount that you would get?
Do you know the total cost of all the projects?
Total cost of everything on here is, I think, around 211 million
Yeah.
in the list.
Clearly.
And as Dr. Tucker mentioned before, we're capped at about 175 million that we could choose to do, and then from there, the board would then choose if we want to do less than that.
Yeah. And that's really where you have to go through that prioritization process, right? So the voters in April would then go to the ballot, look at the ballot language, hopefully approve a no tax levy increase bond issue. As soon as that occurs, then you have your, say, 100 to 150 million, 175 million dollars worth of projects that then our team begins to work on with Hollis and Miller. On the finance piece, what we're able to do as those bonds are sold and revenues received, you're able to invest those and actually receive some return on that investment in respect to some interest that is generated. So while you're working along the way to complete those projects, because of your investment portfolio, and again, there are state and federal requirements that limit as to how much we can make, and interest rates aren't as high as we would love them to be, right? But that additional interest allows you to focus on furnishings, right? So you add an addition, as far as a classroom addition, you got to have desks, you got to have equipment, you have to have all those things. So what we're able to do is to leverage some of that interest for added expenditures that then support those facilities. Another important piece, as we think about overages, as we think about contingencies, each of these projects has a contingency folded into it in the event that we see an uptick in product costs, right? The other piece is we have change orders that come in and we monitor those regularly. So we may think something is going to cost X amount of dollars. Well, it actually comes in a little bit higher or a little bit lower. So then we're constantly revising those projects in terms of what we anticipate them costing versus their actual cost. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah.
Okay. What other questions do we have this morning? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So in regards to the renovations of the older buildings, I had emailed with Mr. Anderson yesterday in regards to the asbestos that was in Lewis and Clark that's been encapsulated, and he talked to me about how it's regularly assessed to make sure that it is still safe for students in that building. But then you talk about over at Heritage, there's currently unused space that would be broken into and renovated, and the same at Franklin as well, being an older facility. So my question is, when you go into those buildings, if you find things like asbestos or other health concerns, is the plan just to encapsulate them like you have at Lewis and Clark, or do you plan to remediate, remove, and correct the issue so it's not an ongoing, item that has to be checked and monitored?
Correct, and mediate the issue from that standpoint. So then if you do look at those buildings that were designed or constructed in the early 1900s to mid 1900s, I can geek out on this, by the way. This was my dissertation on facilities. So each campus, we do a facilities assessment with our building leaders. Mr. Wright, Dr. Wright has participated in several of those, as have our maintenance crew, Mr. Nelson as well. So then as we identify those needs with the input from our building level, that's what makes our summer capital projects, that's what makes in part this project list that you're seeing in terms of our consideration for the bond issue. As you actually get in and do the work, inevitably you uncover something you didn't plan for. I was going to say burial ground, but that's a bad example. We actually did that at Kelly Brook, right? And we had to move a few things around if you know the story. That's for a whole nother conversation. But as far as asbestos and abatement and so forth, even over the course of every year, there are federal and state requirements that we have to abide by as far as inspecting pretty regularly. Is it every 6 months? And that in the event that we do see some asbestos that has been disturbed, then we go and we treat that. We attend to that, whether it's a complete overhaul or just remedying it accordingly. We also use external experts to come in and assist with that. From that standpoint as well. So to your question, as we find things, we attend to them. But we also know that that can come at an added cost. Thus, the contingencies that are built in, as well as those change orders that allow us to be able to do that and stay within our budget. The one thing we don't want to do, whether it's a $50 million bond issue like in 2018 or a potential $100 to $175 million bond issue that we're looking at, is exceed those costs. Because we can't just turn around and tap our community for added revenue. Instead, that added revenue expenditure has to come within our existing budget. Cindy Sullivan would not approve. Does that answer your question?
It does. So then, piggybacking on that, at Lewis and Clark, because I think parents are just now learning about the asbestos there. I had someone reach out to me and bring it to my attention earlier this week. Sure. As long as it checks out okay, is the plan just to leave it? Or
no, revisit it every 6 months and continue to investigate with federal requirements.
Right, but as long as you meet the requirements, there's not going to be, fixing the flooring, for example, because Lewis and Clark has tons of different flooring. Sure. Some of it covers the asbestos flooring. When there's other schools that are receiving the flooring.
Which meets the requirement, but if we were to go into Lewis and Clark and start doing similar renovations, absolutely that would be part of the renovation to that space. And how do you approach replacing an entire school's footprint in flooring and not do that? You would have to attend to that.
Sure. But as long as we keep checking off the boxes and saying it's okay, is that an issue at Lewis and Clark that's going to go on as is, and you're not going to look to fix it or improve it?
No, I think we have a pretty good history of walking through buildings and repairing those floors as we go. So rather than doing all of our footprint at one time, we've been looking at buildings and doing that either through capital or through other projects within our bond issues. Keep in mind 19 campuses to go through. So at some point, roofs, floors, window replacements, all of those pieces come into play. Anything to add to that, Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, I'm thinking there's 2 million square feet across the district. So just kind of, for a little bit of context, but every summer when we do work in buildings, and a lot of it is flooring or ceiling work, I think every summer we run into some asbestos issues because it's prevalent in the old buildings. And that requires us to go through a very formalized process. We're bringing the guys with the suits, seal it all off. So we take care of that and remediate and remove it whenever we encounter it. I think the example you're given is just in those areas where it is safe, and we do monitor it every 6 months to make sure it's safe, but it is so embedded in the mastic of the flooring, and it is encapsulated, and there are no risks to the students or staff in the building. So again, I feel really good about it because we do have a plan and we monitor it, we're on top of it. And then when we do run into things, we completely take care of it and remediate it at that time.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
The verbiage on the ballot for the bond issue, will it just be to, this is the X number of dollars, or will it state what projects will be included in it?
I wish it could state everything you've heard this morning.
Yeah, I do too.
So you do have some limitations in terms of your ballot language. And so what we will end up doing is crafting that, pending the board's approval, with kind of some general areas, you know, whether it's safety and security. You know, you might include classroom renovations, classroom additions, language like that, that won't get into a whole lot of specifics on the ballot. I will say this, as far as a timeline, the board really needs to make a decision to submit the ballot language no later than January. I believe it's January 24th to be specific. At that point, we file the appropriate ballot language, and then we pivot very quickly to informational meetings. By that time, we've identified what the priorities are going to be, what the dollar value is going to be, and then we schedule meetings like this. So any civic organization, community meeting, PTA councils, you name it, neighborhood meetings even, we would want to try to set up. Dallas coordinates that. I think the last time we did that in the spring of 2018, we had over 100 meetings, close to 100 meetings. My wife's here. She didn't see me much that spring. But that's the intent in terms of informational campaign. Now, on the side note, we know that there are community campaigns that also get going, whether it's a vote no campaign or a vote yes campaign. So there's a lot of information swirling and readying for that April ballot election. There's a second piece that we are talking about with the board as well. So for a second, put aside the bond issue language, but we're also looking at a ballot measure that then would give us authority as a school district, but we need community approval to be able to shift a portion of our tax levy that sits in our Fund 3, which is our debt service, over to our operating fund, which is Fund 1. And so just as a couple of examples, if you were to approve that as a community, let's say at 30 cents, where you move 30 cents of your levy from Fund 3, debt service, over to Fund 1, operating, that would generate close to how much money, Ms. Sullivan? About $4.6 million. But that would not change your local taxpayer's tax rate. So it's a no tax levy increase move. But you have to have authority from the community to be able to do that. Allowing us to do that would free up dollars. And so the board then could consider, what do we want to do with salary schedules? What do we want to do to remain competitive, recruit talent, retain teachers? Because we know workforce is a challenge right now. So whether it's 30 cents and receiving close to $5 million in revenue, or 45 cents, I think that gets you closer to 9 million, about 7 million, thank you. I had my numbers off yesterday. And then 60 cents gets you closer to $10 million, right? That's why my CFO is in the back. But that kind of gives you an idea as to, you may end up seeing 2 ballot issues. We saw different districts do this over the last couple of years. We didn't need to do that at that point. But now we're really studying that, just really beginning those conversations with our board and our bonding agent. So, other questions? Yeah.
In regards to when you had items up there, for example, you talked about with security, door latches that may not be functioning correctly. So when you just generally say that, does that mean that you would go through all the buildings in the district and fix that item in every building, or would it get whittled down to specific buildings?
The district already has an understanding of which may be a problematic door that they're continually adjusting and fixing. And so they have a list of what needs to be replaced already to help free up that time of always adjusting and making sure that it works correctly. So that list is within these projects for consideration, is which ones would be replaced.
It allows you to get to a larger amount of those faster than just within your summer maintenance and your summer capital work.
So when you say latching, is that interior doors or is that exterior doors as well?
It could be all of it. It could be both. Yeah, I don't have the
wanna add
specific
to that,
list in
Steve?
front of me, but
Just because the doors are functioning, it's just some
Right.
require extra care and attention because of their age.
exactly.
So this would really breathe pool life into several doors, exterior doors primarily, but interior doors as well.
Okay.
And then the locking systems and, what one's required for that system, and kind of strategic.
Fantastic. Thank you.
What other questions do we have? We've got the rest of the day. You may not, but we do have another portion, so I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Yeah. So we appreciate your guys' questions. Great questions. We had a few questions for you. Just real quickly, wanted to get some in-person input. So if you have your phone, we're going to do a quick little Slido poll. And the first thing we're going to do is ask you just to choose your top 5 benefit areas. And if you see up here on the screen, again, you can use that QR code, or you can go to slido.com and put in that number. What's on the screen is what we collected last night at the community meeting, so your input is going to add to that poll. And again, the benefit areas are just areas that we have identified each project on how they impact different areas of the district. So you'll see things like student learning or athletic and fine arts or just infrastructure improvements. And so just interested from your perspective of, what's the most important or the top 5 benefit areas to focus on? And after you select your top 5, be sure to hit send. I think it says send or submit at the bottom. That'll help us collect that information from you. Like maybe one more to come in here, and then we'll pivot to one more question before I lose you guys for today. All right, so you'll see just out of about the 40 people between last night and this morning that did this poll for us, student learning is the top of our list, and I think that's kind of a no-brainer. That's why we're all here, right, is those students and the student learning. But then beyond that, just the athletics, fine arts, the safety, investing in our infrastructure, and then looking for ways to have the operational efficiency to help save for other things. I'm going to go ahead, if you're still in there, we'll still collect your information, but we're going to go ahead and move to the next question. If everybody's ready. And so real quick, we're going to ask you to pick your potential top projects. Now, this screen with the list of projects is a snapshot of the Let's Talk portal that you can go to the district website and click on any one of those project buttons, if you will, and it'll get you a lot more information on that project than I was able to share today. Also allows you to ask questions or make comments. So we're going to go and ask you to pick your top 5 projects from that list of 31 different projects. You don't want to see that one? I guess I should have done a separate poll then. I can hide it. There you go. And show you what the lowest one was. Yep.
Yeah.
It is combined from last night, yes. There's about 26, 27 last night that took the Slido poll last night. I think we had about 30 or so in attendance. Awesome. And while we're still collecting the information through the Slido poll, if you guys have additional questions, we would also entertain those as well while we're all here.
Okay, that's fine. Right, well, and I knew that couldn't be done, but I also just wasn't sure if it was like, well, we're here, we might as well, like, have them stay here, and just because I feel like the sense is that more your schools are bigger than what high school is currently, but it's always
Shay and I were talking briefly. She asked a question in and around the middle levels and their current enrollments, and that they're not equal, right? I'm going to look over your shoulder. The middle schools. Yeah, your current middle school enrollments. So DMS is right around 650 as compared to South Valley closer to 800, Heritage closer to 800, and then LMS closer to 650. We explored, in respect to the gym performing arts spaces, we explored briefly, and then Kevin told us we really couldn't do that. This notion of a joint space or a shared space. And if you attended one of our earlier meetings last year, you may recall there's actually an elevation difference between the two.
It's about 10 feet of elevation difference between each building. It doesn't look like that when you're on site. And both those buildings weren't designed to really connect. To be able to get a great connection between the two, you'd end up losing kitchen space or going around the existing gyms, and probably end up creating a really long, hard to supervise corridor that would be good for no one. So we really didn't feel like that was the right solution for the staff and students of those two buildings.
So thus the idea to bring two forward that are comparable, but then also take into account that performing arts piece. So you have, if you have a student at LMS, you have access to the community center, which is a great space. They utilize that quite a bit for their fine arts performances. At Heritage Middle School, you have an older space, but up to date in terms of a renovation we did not too long ago. So it's a nice space as well, compared to DMS in South Valley, where you're in the gym / cafeteria / auditorium. I guess it's not used as much as a gym, but it isn't conducive to performing arts and fine arts. So then can you capture a more conducive space by looking at these additions at South Valley and DMS that then accomplish both, that added gym space, but then in addition, how do we incorporate that performing arts space as well? So the other piece to that would be our demographic projections and projecting out whether those enrollments stay the same at every building, whether or not they fluctuate ever so slightly, or one blows up and the other three shrink. The conversation people don't really want to have, but you have to throw it out there, is this notion of, do we get to a point of redistricting, right? And nobody wants to talk about that, right? However, with our board and our conversations, the conversation has been slightly different these last few years, where you look at these developments, particularly on the western side of our district as you get over by Kellybrook, and you look at these phases of neighborhoods that are coming in and new rooftops. As developments come in and rooftops are added, resulting in added students, can you make your adjustments along the way? And we've done some of that with Shoal Creek and Kellybrook. Actually went door to door and talked with families and said, hey, this is a new phase. we know that you purchased your home with Shoal Creek in mind, but we have opportunity to readjust and move over to Kellybrook because we have space. And those are one-on-one conversations with families. I think they appreciate that. Many of them say, yeah, I want to go to that smaller school. But at the same time, some want to be grandfathered in because their older sibling attended Shoal Creek, so we want the younger kiddo to go to Shoal Creek as well. That's the degree of care and attention that we're taking to that with that example with Kellybrook and Shoal Creek. Can we do that every time? Hopefully, but maybe not. That then might get us to a broader conversation around if and when we have to look at boundary adjustments and certainly engage our community along the way. So. Yeah, I didn't personally do all that. Yes, I gave the green light and said, yes, let's do that. So, yeah.
That's not the Heritage Kitchen, is it? That's the classroom, number 6 there?
Number 6 would be that flex instruction, collaborative learning environment renovations, yeah. So Heritage is on there several times in a couple different projects, yeah.
Number 3, how, if it did get approved, how quickly would they be built and finished? And then you're taking away parking, which I know originally years ago they were talking about removing those buildings and adding those parking spaces. There doesn't seem to be anywhere to expand for parking. The Performance Arts Center in the back is always, there's no parking. Is there any talk about what they can do about that if you're adding more tennis courts, which requires more parking?
Which we're happy about the tennis courts, but the park is a problem.
Yeah, we have looked at that very carefully, and I think with the added parking behind the Fine Arts, with the parking by the new activities complex, this will lose some parking, but not a ton, because a lot of it's taken up by structures right now. So, and right now there's an excess of parking on campus. There's more parking there than the current need is from a staff and student standpoint. So working with the building, they're very comfortable with that plan for tennis, that won't upset their balance on parking. Yeah, and I think part of that is, you know, do you want to park down by the stadium where that big extra lot is, and which is not convenient, certainly, but yeah.
And use of Epic, use of our building over here as well. So Friday night football is probably the best example, right? Or the other night at a volleyball game, where you've got a big turnout from that standpoint. In terms of the other piece of your question, how quickly can that happen? Some of that work actually started a couple years back. So there used to be, you may not remember, underneath there was a tank, a gas storage tank, because we had a gas pump over there to help service our vehicles. We went in, tore that out, abated that in accordance with EPA and so forth. So that was a huge piece. That no longer needs to be tackled. So then you do have some demolition and ground prep before you start pouring concrete and, you know, striping and all of that stuff. There's an easy path. And I've seen it in some districts, and it costs a lot less money, where you take an old asphalt parking lot and you paint it green. Right, I've seen that. That's kind of the cheap way to go from that standpoint. As far as all of these projects, that's where we get to a timeline and a prioritization and schedule as to when these projects begin, with the idea being we want to try to, as best as able, minimize disruption to the current operations during the course of the school year. So then we would probably start a lot of these projects over the course of the summer months. That particular project is one that can get done a little faster as compared to an entire addition, for example. So, yeah.
I mean, we're obviously have kids in the district who are for this. What is the opposition, like what do they say about these kind of things? I don't understand why this wouldn't go.
People have a lot of different opinions. Yeah, and I think, and keep in mind, I'll just say it this way. A lot of times people think about where their kids are in the journey, right? My kiddo's at our elementary, therefore my mindset is at this level, okay? As compared to middle school, as compared to high school, as compared to I'm a senior citizen and I don't like high taxes, right? So all of those factor in. Typically, school districts see a better passage rate when it's a no tax levy increase. That's key, right? That falls on stewardship by our board and our administration and how you're managing your debt service and your dollars and so forth. We have a good history of that. Then you get into specific projects. There are some that don't want any athletic projects on a list versus others that are present advocating for it, or the fine arts can be approached the same way and so forth. Safety and security, so I mean it just really varies on people's perspectives. But then there are also those in our world that aren't going to pass anything. Doesn't matter what it is, they're not going to pass anything. So I think there's a lot of different reasons, probably some I'm leaving out. But I think that's where we want to, on our end, make certain that our community understands, here are the needs, here are our challenges. There's a second piece we've not talked about. And so as you think about all of these priorities in excess of $200 million, when we identify the amount that the board is comfortable with in those projects, something falls off the prioritization list. But it's probably still a significant need. So then we have to have a companion conversation around what are our alternative approaches given that we still have that need, right? And pick any project and say that gets left off. How do we solve the tennis issue? How do we solve the energy efficiency and our continued utility costs? On and on and on. You could play that scenario in and around every single one of these projects. And so that just kind of gives you that sense of, as we identify those needs at every campus and across our programs, we also need to be thinking about what are our alternative solutions in the event we can't do that just yet. Or the circumstances change, we may not ever be able to do that, that then causes us to have to problem solve. The best, but also worst example is when you have a school enrollment that's increasing and you have to problem solve for classrooms. One of the alternative solutions is bring in a mobile unit to serve as those classrooms for a period of time. We've had to do that some. We've not had to do that lately. But those are the types of, let's go to the drawing board and figure this out with the help of our Board of Education.
Sorry, does the private sector at all get involved? Like getting, not like a capital campaign, but like funding from private companies that could see the benefit of having the district economically for the city?
Typically not within a bond issue.
Okay.
In terms of their financial contribution. Other than our contracts that we work on and we award as we do bidding, and whether it's our construction management or various subcontractors, right, we do a lot of that to be able to do the work and to be able to see it through. That's really the extent of that, but as far as like an external organization, corporation, or company, really typically they don't get involved. I don't have an example of when.
But just funding some of these things if they're not able to be funded.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's possible.
Okay.
That's possible. And a best example of that would be the activities complexes.
Sure. Yeah.
And there's a history there, if you'll remember. We put out the idea of one stadium for the entire district. It also had an increase in our tax levy. And so that particular ballot measure failed. We went back to the drawing board. We brought it back minus the activities complex, and wanted to explore a joint public-private partnership for an activities complex to build one stadium. That particular ballot measure passed without the stadium on it, and then we went to the drawing board, again, because we saw the challenge and the need and wanted to come up with an alternative. And so as several of us onboarded 8-9 years ago, that was one of our first conversations. How can we solve that need? Do we go after a private-public joint facility? Well, then the conversation shifted. We actually have two footprints. We had the track, we had the field at both high schools. What would it look like for a private-public partnership that then would build up those activities complexes? Took a lot of a lift, but we had a lot of partnerships from many of you, many private individuals, but then also companies that said, yeah, I want to be a part of that, whether it's advertising or a one-time contribution that then gives us the spaces we currently have. That was a huge lift. And a lot of people don't know the full backstory. But that's probably the closest example to your point in terms of private opportunity for partnership. Yeah.
So hearing you talk about that we've done before, and the question you asked about partnerships, I think it kind of ties back to my first question, which was about like, I hope that as we look at these, people think, okay, what those stadiums cost us then, if we were to do them now, what would that be? Because it wouldn't be, what I'm saying? Like, the lift that it was would be very different now.
Right. Yeah. There's a multiplier in there. Yeah. Great questions. Great discussion. Anything else from the group?
appreciate your guys' input today. Another plug for the district website. So if you go to the district website, there's a facility master plan tab that you can click. That'll allow you to get to the Let's Talk portal as well as take that online survey. There's a couple sheets on some of your tables that have those links to the portal and to the survey. Please take the time to take the survey, join the portal, talk to your friends, your neighbors, encourage them to do as well, because this is the best way that we can kind of get as many voices to the table as possible. So really appreciate your guys' time this morning and your attention. Great questions. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Please make sure and sign in so we can account for who's present with us. But thank you all. Please be in touch if you have any other thoughts or questions for us.